Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into the Volquest podcast. I am Eric Kane alongside Rob Lewis and Brent Hubbs. As always, a big thank you to our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions for making this podcast possible. Local and trusted since 1999. If you have a need for roofing, siding, decking, whatever the windows, whatever the case may be, if you want a home renovation here in this summer, or home repairs from the summer storms, contact Exterior Home Solution today. 865-524-5888 or online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. All right, we are inching ever so close to the start of fall camp. That'll get going a week. Well, I guess media day is a week from the day. First practice is a week from tomorrow, and the SEC Media Days in Dallas, Texas wrapped up last week with the media presence voting on the predicted order of finish. And gentlemen, Tennessee came in 7th. Predict to finish 7th in the 16-team SEC for 2024. Brent Hubbs, is that too high, too low, or is it just about right for the Tennessee football team ahead of the season?
I think if you're Tennessee, you love where you're sitting at right now. I mean, I think that, middle of the pack, people are kind of disrespecting you. You can play that card, the chip on the shoulder card. Rob, every coach loves to play that one as much as they can. I sit here and look at it. I mean, I'm not sold yet on what LSU is going to be. Ole Miss's schedule's not bad. I think Missouri's bringing a lot of people back. I get the Missouri love right now. But I think when you look at that, to me, Georgia, I guess Texas, and then after that, don't you think you can kind of put those other teams kind of in a cluster together, sort of 3A, 3B, C, D? I mean, is that out of the realm? And when you look at, Rob, you've done the opponent previews. I know not everybody Tennessee's playing is in that group there above, but I mean you've looked at Georgia, you've looked at Alabama closely, Oklahoma right there. I mean, does it feel like it's kind of those two teams and then a hodgepodge of teams behind them, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't. I'm with you, bro. I would agree with that. I mean, Alabama, man, I would almost say Alabama seems a little high to me, but I get it. They it's not like the cupboard's bare just because Nick is gone. And whether you love Milroe or hate him, you still got to experience at quarterback with a guy that's played a lot of football. So, I mean, I would say, yeah, but I mean, Georgia and Texas clearly, I mean, all that talent in the quarterback position is settled at a high level, which I think is important. But yeah, after that, I would almost agree with you. 3 through 8. I don't know that. I would like to see the Las Vegas odds on just those. You take Georgia and Texas out of it, and if it was just the conference race consisted of Alabama down through Oklahoma, what would that voting look like? Because I think that'd be pretty interesting.
I think 3 through 8 is kind of a hodgepodge there. In saying that, I think Ole Miss and Alabama need to be at the top of that, which is where they are. I'm not super high on Ole Miss being a top 4 team in the conference, but when you stack it up against some of the other teams kind of in that group of, the LSU's, Missouri's, Tennessee's, Oklahoma's, I get it. You do bring back a very experienced quarterback. You bring back a playmaker, a wide receiver. You lose a good running back, but you got plenty of options there offensively. I get all that. So I'm fine with Alabama and Ole Miss coming in 3-4 respectively behind Georgia and Texas, which I agree with are the undisputed top teams heading into the season. Where I think it's different here, Rob, LSU, I'm not saying it's not going to be talented, and Garrett Nussmeier's far from an offseason addition that they got. He's been in the program for a couple of years, and he's seen some action, so they're going to be fine at quarterback. But you do lose a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. You do lose a first-round wide receiver. Your defense last year, despite having one of the better defensive players in the country in Harold Perkins, was not good. So what about this LSU team that's different from last year gives you the confidence that they're going to be better than what they were last year when they should have been great? So I would have had Missouri and Tennessee ahead of LSU. That'd be my one gripe. I'm fine with Missouri being in front of Tennessee just because of everything it brings back and what it came off last year. I understand that when we're talking preseason rankings, but I would certainly have LSU flipped, maybe in that 7th spot behind Missouri and Tennessee.
Yeah, I was just saying, I don't have a lot to add there other than with LSU's defense being what it was last year, and you lose, Daniels. That would, it's not like getting on a soapbox and banging your chest about, but that's what I'm with EC is a little. You can quibble with that one.
Yeah, but you also got to remember, I mean, there's a Vanderbilt got a first place vote in this deal.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, you got to put into. I mean, you got people asking questions in the media group wearing their Auburn gear. I mean, like Auburn quarter zips, asking coaches questions. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to pick on media days, but this order of finish is always kind of laughable when you look at some of the teams that get first place votes. And I know somebody does Vanderbilt every year as a joke, and I get all that. But I mean, I don't know how many media people take it really seriously. But I think what we all agree on is the top three, just because Alabama's still Alabama. Until Alabama gets knocked down a peg, Alabama's still Alabama, right? So they're going to get that respect, as they should. I got no problem with that. Um, Ole Miss, are they a hype machine? Are they real? I mean, they've been good, right? I mean, they have. It's not like Lane's teams have been bad. So I can see them there. And then I'm with you guys on LSU. I mean, I don't know what that team's going to look like. I mean, you're assuming that they fix a lot of their problems to put them fifth. Is what you're assuming, and I think that's a real assumption. In so I don't have. I mean, I don't think it's a huge deal either way. I think the top two are pretty obvious. Then it gets a little bit muddled, and you could certainly put Tennessee anywhere from probably 4 until 7, 8. Probably realistically 5 makes more sense. I kind of thought they would come in at 5, um, or right there with Missouri. Again, I think those teams are sort of equal. Now, we talk about LSU banking on, their media love is a lot of people banking on them fixing a defense and fixing this. I mean, the Tennessee love's banked on Nico being the real deal.
Yeah.
Much the same way Oklahoma's love is being banked on, their kid being the real deal. So we'll see. I mean, it's one of those deals. If your quarterback plays well, you probably exceed your expectation. If your quarterback doesn't play up to standards, then you're probably not going to finish where you thought you were going to finish. And I just think that's the way it is.
But I would also say, guys, I mean, I don't think it's outlandish or unprecedented either. I mean, it's not everybody makes that leap, but what was Tua like when he got his first shot? What was Bryce Young like when he? I'm talking about top 10 overall 5-star plus guys. I mean, I'm not talking about we need the number 89 kid to come through when he's a sophomore. I'm talking the dudes that everybody thought were dudes. Not everybody, not all those guys panned out, but the ones who did, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. I mean, these were guys that were the chosen one when they were juniors in high school, like Nico. I mean, it's not. What I'm saying is, it's not that far fetched that he's that guy.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right, Rob, 100%. I mean, if I'm looking at Tennessee and LSU, I like Tennessee with Nico better than I like LSU with Nussmeier. I mean, that just, when I look at the comparisons there, I'll take Nico over Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams. I mean, what was he like? And again,
right.
I'm not saying Nico is that guy, but I mean, everybody, he had that same rep that those kids had, or when they were kids. 17, 18-year-old guys.
And hey, 3 or 4 games into this thing, you might take Nico over a couple other guys in front of him on that list. Just depending on if this thing goes the way that you hope it goes. And it's not going to go bad. I don't want anybody listening to this, watching this, going, well, Hubs is doubting Nico. I think he's going to be fantastic. I do. I don't think there's anything about him. I think he's a safe bet to be a really effective, really good college quarterback. Does that mean he's going to win the Heisman this year? No. But he's going to be a good player. He's going to thrive in this system, assuming he stays healthy, which is the assumption that you're making for every quarterback on this list with every team. He's going to be a really good player. And Rob, you're exactly right. Years ago, that would be a stretch to say a redshirt freshman was going to be the guy, having limited playing time. But with what you've seen with the impact young quarterbacks are making in college football, it's no longer a stretch, right? It's no longer a high risk to say this freshman's going to be good or redshirt freshman's going to be a really good player, because that's become much more commonplace around the country for the last 4 or 5 years in particular.
Yeah, you still have Brock Vandergriffs happen, out there, but also, Bryce Young's happened. The guy, get
Sure.
in and look like just like everybody, thought he was going to look. So
If you're watching this podcast right now, you see the graphic up on the screen. I think we can all agree that with this new era of college football and the 12-team playoff, this new era of the SEC, when we're looking at 16 teams in front of us, no East, no West, the left column of 1 through 8, the Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri, Tennessee, Oklahoma, is different from the right column of A&M, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. Meaning, the left column 1 through 8. I mean, you can. I mean, we got to see how the season plays out. Don't get me wrong. You can make an argument that those 8 teams can make the college football playoff, the 12-team playoff. Whereas, boy, you're going out on a limb if you want to try to make an argument right now that any of those teams on the right, 9 through 16, have a chance to make it into the college football playoff. Am I mistaken here?
Man, I'd say any team below Kentucky is not a lock to make a bowl game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Florida's, Billy Napier, we know he's coaching for his life right now. Shane Beamer is going to be interesting here in year 4 for him, coming off what was last season. Arkansas, Sam Pittman's on the hot seat. Mississippi State's getting going with Jeff Levy.
It is year 0 of Mississippi State. You talk about, doing season predictions or, looking at season previews. Man, 50-plus new guys on that roster with the turnover. Transfers in, transfers out.
Yeah, they're a total different deal. I think when you look at that, the right side, which is 9 through 16, A&M starting over, they've inherited a mess there, right? How much do you have to clean up in the locker room? What all does that look like? I think is a big question mark. Auburn, what are they at quarterback until they get a guy who can really play the quarterback for Hugh Freeze? What does that look like? Kentucky's banking a lot on Brock Vandagriff. We'll see. Florida, Billy Napier's out there selling it like they're moving in the right direction. But what does he do at quarterback? I mean, is there not going to be pressure for him to go young there?
And it's funny, too,
even
bro,
though he's
because
got a 6-year quarterback playing.
And he played well last year.
Mertz was not bad at all.
He was not bad at all. But you're right. When you're coaching for your life, you have that pressure to where it's like, okay, well, you better play this young guy to come here and save your job, or you'll get pressure from the higher ups, the people who are, holding all the money. I'm intrigued to see how that plays out because we know about the schedule, and that they had that daunting 5-game schedule to end, or 5-game swing to end the season. And that's not even counting Tennessee there in the middle. It's going to be interesting. But you're right. I mean, we're talking about your quarterback. I mean, Graham Mertz had a fine year last year, but do you get to a point to where you've got to make a change for your 5-star plus all-American guy that's a first-year player?
Yeah, and so the question is, do you split your quarterbacks? You split time. You do a 2-quarterback deal early in the year to see where you're at your best with that stretch to close. That is such a challenging stretch to close with. I mean, I think how he manages that locker room with his quarterback deal will be unique. Will be interesting to watch. I think at Arkansas, Rob, you've done that preview. They're banking on the Boise State quarterback. They think they can be with him, with a new coordinator, in Bobby Petrino. I mean, they think that they can be much better offensively than they've been. I'm just not sure if they've got enough horses in the stable to make any real noise.
No, I don't see it. I mean, I think, hiring Bobby Petrino to be your offensive coordinator at a place where all that happened. I mean, I like when Sam Pittman was here, I don't pretend to know him or be a friend, but I liked him a lot. I think he's, thought he was a great dude, but that's a move that just kind of smacks of desperation to me. And personnel wise, however, it's hard to see how that offense is going to get a lot better. I mean, I don't pretend to be an expert, but, I read up a lot on, since that was one of the opponents, and it's not like they, the kid came in from Boise State and, he had some nice numbers, but it's not like he was, just set the world on fire there. I mean, to me, I'm not sure he's that huge of an upgrade over KJ Jefferson, who, was also Arkansas's leading rusher last year. That's I don't want to go too inside baseball on it, but if you're looking at that Arkansas team and what they were last year compared to when they had some success under Coach Pittman, they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't move people at all. And, for a guy like Sam Pittman, who has, built his whole career on being an offensive line guy, guru, and, trenches guy, for Arkansas to not be physical at all and not, just not be able to run the ball. I think that was that was sort of a bad sign for them. And I'll be surprised if they can get that turned around. It just feels like a dead man walking. And I hate to say that about him because you'll never hear anybody say a bad word about Coach Pittman, I don't think.
No, yeah, Rocket Sanders. I mean, he's a pretty good back, and he obviously didn't have a great year last year. I think he dealt with some injuries, but I mean, he's leaving Arkansas. He's going to South Carolina, so you lost that playmaker. You already brought up KJ Jefferson, who it feels like he's been in college for 2 decades, but he's no longer part of the program. So yeah, that screams very, very had some Texas A&M vibes in a different way, just meaning they go out and get a former established coach and much less a coach that was at Arkansas to come in and call the offense this year. I'll be intrigued to see how that kind of works out. But yeah, I think Tennessee overall, I think that's kind of fine. I agree with what you said earlier, Brent. I think if you're Josh Heupel, if you're Tennessee, you love where you're at. It's like, okay, well, kind of middle of the pack right now, kind of the underdog. Let's see what happens. You never want to have all that expectations on you, playing from ahead, being a top 4 team or something like that. So I think Tennessee should have been somewhere around 5 or 6, but I think they'll take 7, and certainly that'll get going on August the 31st when Tennessee opens up against UT Chattanooga. Also voted on at the SEC Media Days, 2 preseason first-team all-SEC selections. Shocker, I know it's James Pierce and Cooper Mays. The actual shocker here is that those are the only 2 Tennessee representatives on those teams across 3 teams, not 1, not 2, but 3. Anybody else gets snubbed if you. And again, this is very much talking season, Brent. Mm-hmm. This very much doesn't matter. But when you go 3 deep, when you go 3 preseason teams deep, I mean, I'm very surprised that a Amari Thomas, a Dylan Sampson, several other Javonte Spraggins, maybe a John Campbell, those names weren't mentioned somewhere over the course of the board
how about Squirrel.
Yeah, Squirrel White, outside of Cooper Mays and James Pierce being the first team.
Squirrel had 60+ catches left. I'm not. I don't know if it's a snub. I'm just saying, he's done a lot in this league.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, I think Squirrel would make some sense. I think from a running back standpoint, what do they pick? 6 backs.
Yes.
I think by the end of the year, I think Dylan Sampson's there. But I mean, he was. I don't even know that people realize how many yards he rushed for last year. Right? I mean, because it was all about Jalen Wright. He had 1,000 yards, and Tennessee ran the ball well. But I don't know that anybody probably even looked at Dylan Sampson's numbers. You know what I mean? He's kind of the new guy that nobody's really talked about a whole lot. So, I think by the end of the year, I think Dylan Sampson is one of the top 6 backs in this league. But again, he's got more of a body of work than most of the league probably recognizes. But I don't know how many people went, as Rob likes to say, baseball number and really started looking into what all, Dylan Sampson did or didn't do. The question for me is when you look at that first team that's on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, but I'm not going to run down everybody, but you look at that, Rob, is James Pierce the best player in the league? Period.
Are you talking about most impactful on the field every Saturday?
You got Carson Beck, who's obviously won a national title at quarterback. But when you look at the top 22 players, Beck, Trevor Etienne, Hunter, the running back at Auburn, Luther Burden's a good player. Trey Harris. Is he the second best or the best player in the league?
Well, I mean, if you quarterback, you just talk about how important that position is. I mean,
you're always going to take the quarterback, right?
Let's take quarterback out of it.
Okay,
let's do that.
All right, that's fine.
Best non-quarterback player in the league. I think that's a really interesting question. I think we're all probably, I wouldn't say biased. We just see him all the time and have an appreciation for what he can do. But man, on that list, I would take him first on that list. The only guys I would think, Luther Burden, pretty dynamic football player. He jumps out at me, and I don't pretend to be an offensive line expert, but the people that are, they love them some Tate Ratledge as far as an NFL prospect and what he does at this level against his peers. But man, I would you can give me James Pierce, and I'd be happy with that if that was my first draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, I would start off by saying if you're looking at this list, the first team offense, first team defense voted on by the media. There are several other really good players on the second, third team. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good players here. Will Campbell, offensive lineman, offensive tackle from LSU. He's going to be a first-round pick next year. His right tackle in that LSU offense, Emory Jones, who was, I believe, third team, he's going to be a day 1-2 pick in the NFL draft, and that's why Lance Hurd's at Tennessee. He's not on this roster. Kelvin Banks Jr., Tennessee tried to get him in recruiting way back when. He's going to be a first-round pick. Luther Burden might be the most explosive player on this list right here outside of James Pierce. So if you look at it from NFL projections, if you look at it from playmaking ability, there's a lot to go here with. I would go either and he won't, the draft won't reflect this, but Harold Perkins is a really good player. But Deion Walker at Kentucky is a good player. But I would take James Pierce. All that to say, I would still take James Pierce because I think he impacts the game the most of anybody on this list. I think that not only making the plays, but you have to strategize against a James Pierce, and he's going to open things up for, I mean, I'm not trying to take everything away from Tyler. Look at Tyler Barron last year. Look at the year that he had. I mean, look at some of these guys on the interior because everybody was focused on James Pierce last year. I would take James Pierce, but there's a lot of good players on that list for sure.
Yeah, I just asked the question because, you could certainly make the case that it's James Pierce. I think the thing about James Pierce that we're going to hear when you get into the NFL talking season, provided James Pierce, stays healthy and does what we expect him to do this fall, I think you're going to hear a lot more about James Pierce's versatility and that he's more than just an edge guy, that he's more than just a speed rusher off the edge, that he can play in space, that he can do some things, that there's a lot more dynamics to James Pierce than just a, bend guy around the edge to speed rush tackles. And I think that's what the NFL is going to really be talking about and really love with James Pierce when they start doing a real true scout on what James Pierce can do and where he's at athletically. So I just wondered, I was just curious to see your all's thoughts on sort of where he was. I mean, listen, I think Luther Burden's great. I mean, from an NFL standpoint, I know there's been runs on receivers the last few years, but I mean, James Pierce is going to go high in the draft because of the position he plays. The same way that those tackles are going to go high in the draft because of the position that they play. Does that mean he's the best player in the league? I don't know, but I was just curious to see your all's thoughts on sort of where you thought he stacked up with the rest of the first team guys. Because I think you can make a case he's the best player in the league outside of the quarterback position.
And when you're talking about that versatility, at this time, James Pierce will be drafted way higher than that of Harold Perkins, but Harold Perkins will be a high draft pick. Harold Perkins can play off ball in the middle of that 4-2-5. Harold Perkins can come off the edge. They for years it feels like they've been trying to figure out kind of where's best for him to play in that LSU defense. That's the type of versatility that you hope you can see from James Pierce. And moving forward, for he can continue to grow in his game, and NFL scouts will all just love that if he can add some off-ball defender into his arsenal, kind of like that of Harold Perkins at LSU.
Well, I know Huber remembers this because he's Encyclopedia Brown of Tennessee football. But you talk about that versatility, Huber. How much money did Derek Barnett make, and how many times did you see that clip of him covering a Texas A&M guy 30 yards?
Yeah,
downfield on the sideline, and James Pierce is. I know you remember that.
Absolutely.
It was at every draft cut up that was there, and they're different type players, but obviously, James Pierce. I mean, you're going to see that kind of stuff from him in his, in the NFL lead up to the draft. I mean, he's. I think you're right. A lot more than just an edge rusher.
Yeah, and I mean, I tell parents and kids all the time that are coming out of high school, they're working on their huddle tape. What do I need to put on my huddle tape? Your most athletic play. I don't care if it's a tackle. I don't care. Just your most athletic play. Put that play on tape because that's what's going to jump out to scouts. You're right, Rob. I mean, how many more impactful plays did Derek Barnett have in his Tennessee career than covering a wheel route down the sideline?
Might have been the third or fourth option on the read.
Right, but one of those when he was there and he was in coverage and covered him and could make that play, that's what NFL people are looking like. That's the baseball numbers as you're doing a deep dive into that stuff. Here's the thing about Perkins. At what point do you start to wonder on Harold Perkins, is he a positionless player? Like, I mean, he's you mentioned, Eric, they haven't figured out kind of where to play. And well, why not? Like, right? I mean, like if he's one of your best 11, make put him in a position to go make the most plays and turn him loose. I mean, there's been so much discussion in Baton Rouge about what to do with him. It's like, why? I mean, why is he positionless, so to speak? You know what I mean? Like, let him go make plays is what.
If memory serves me right, and I could be completely wrong here because I don't watch every single LSU game. I want to say his freshman year, he was an edge. Like, they just brought him in to rush the quarterback. He came off the edge. Last year, and I believe he's a junior upcoming, last year he was off the ball kind of in the middle, and then he would blitz all the time. And so they were trying to be like, well, his best attribute is rushing the quarterback, but we think he can still help best in the middle, but we're going to blitz him a lot. I don't know. I mean, if his best attribute is getting after the quarterback, I'd be hard-pressed not to line him up on the edge right there and let him be James Pierce and go get the quarterback. That's just me.
I watched Tennessee take an edge guy and put him in the middle as a linebacker, and it cost him a lot. It cost him money in the NFL draft, and that was Leonard Little. Yeah. Leonard Little's best attribute was coming off the edge, getting after the quarterback, and the decision to put him in the middle did not make him any money with that. So I'll be curious to see where Perkins is at. There's no question of his talent. They obviously that whole defense struggled, but part of their struggle started with they weren't sure what to do with him and kind of played him out of position, slowed him down. It looked like on defense when you watched him play, just didn't play as fast. So be curious to see how they use him this fall and some of these other guys how they develop. I mean, Malachi Starks has played for like 1900 years at Georgia. It feels
like Malachi Moore has as well at Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, those guys have been there a long time. So good players, and that's why this league's the best league in the country, from a depth standpoint, top to bottom.
Talking about the versatility there of Harold Perkins and what NFL scouts can see James Pierce kind of evolving into versatility. Tennessee got a pretty good versatile pickup via the 2025 recruiting class with the commitment over the weekend. Who was that? And what about his game is going to be intriguing for the Volunteers down the line? That and a whole lot more as we continue on here with a Tuesday edition of the Volquest podcast. But first, a word from our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
Severe weather can strike at any time in East Tennessee, and Mother Nature can do severe damage to the first and most important line of defense that you and your family have against Mother Nature, and that is your roof. Whenever she strikes, make sure that you call the people that I call. Make sure you trust the people that I trust, and that's my friends at Exterior Home Solutions, because they're more than friends, they're truly family.
As always, big thank you to our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions. Pick up the phone today and give them a call at 865-524-5888. You can visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com as well. A free estimate. If you have a need for roofing, siding, windows, or a garage, you can contact Exterior Home Solutions today. They've been local and trusted since 1999. Okay, so Christian Gass committed to the University of Tennessee on Saturday. The Saturdays have been pretty fruitful for the Volunteers the last couple of weeks. That committed class is now up to 18 players. Tennessee is now sitting just outside the top 10, number 6 in the SEC. But as we know, there are several more announcements coming up in the next, several weeks, and some guys to watch out for potential flips. I think Tennessee is going to finish with a top 10 class and top 5 in the SEC. But on Christian Gass here, Brett Hubbs, a versatile player. Tennessee likes him at linebacker, but a guy that can get up there on the edge and rush the quarterback. Good size already at 220, 6'2.5", 6'3", playing good high school football in the state of Georgia. On threes high on him, 85th overall in the country. Has him as the 6th best linebacker, 14th best prospect in the state of Georgia. This is a guy that Tennessee's been on for quite some time, and he went ahead and made it official on Saturday, committing to Tennessee.
Yeah, beat up Georgia straight up for him.
Yep.
And then the Georgia people will tell you Georgia wanted him. So let's stop that narrative. That narrative's not been out there, but I mean, this is a head-to-head battle that Tennessee won over Georgia, and that's saying a lot because, I mean, Georgia has been kind of linebacker the last few years when you look at what Georgia's been able to do with that defense, who they put in the league and all those things. The one thing, in talking to Christian Gass, I had a chance to visit with him right after his official visit at Tennessee. He's about football, and he was here – not necessarily for the social scene. He was here to learn about how they would use him in this defense and how he would fit in the defense and where that was compared to Georgia, and kind of weighing it out that way. And Tennessee sees him, Rob, as a versatile guy who can do different things and can play different spots, not just be pigeonholed as kind of a rush linebacker, inside guy. And I think that Tennessee sold him hard on that versatility. I think that was something that jumped out to him on his official visit. And I think that was a huge part of why he really started diving deep into Tennessee, was because of how they showed him they would use him in a variety of different ways, not just a guy who played downhill towards the quarterback, but played in space.
And that kind of stuff really appeals to kids. I mean, taking it back, you were talking about James Pierce and the versatility. I mean, all guys like Christian Gass that are serious about football, they know what the NFL is looking for. I mean, they know. I mean, they are well aware of it. I mean, kids that are serious like that young man. So, having a program or a coaching staff that can, show you exactly here's A, B, and C of what we're talking about would, not just sticking you with your hand in the ground. Here you are, out on the slot. Here you are, dropping, stunting inside or whatever. I think, kids are very interested in that. They don't want to be put in a box. They don't want to, at least as an 18-year-old freshman with a recruiting pitch. I think that kind of stuff is super attractive to young guys.
Well, one of the you're exactly right. One of the catchphrases, Eric, that you hear in the NFL all the time is he a 3-down player, a 2-down player, a 3rd-down only player? These kids want to be 3-down players. They want to show their versatility and be able to be on the field all the time because they're not pigeonholed into one thing. And I think that was a big part. And you see in his clips, I mean, yeah, he plays along the line of scrimmage. He plays off the edge, but he also plays in coverage and does a lot of things for his high school as an outside guy. And now we'll see what his body goes into and all those things. But I think this is a really, really good pickup for Tennessee. I think this was one of those deals where your recruiting calendar worked in your favor. I think you understood what was important to him and recruited to that. I think you had a great feel of what he was about and who he was. And I think I think they did a terrific job on the official visit and on his visits to Tennessee because they knew the personality and knew what he was about. And I think that was a real key to Tennessee's success with him in recruiting.
Yeah. So it's a really, obviously I watched it the other day, but I mean, it's a really impressive highlight tape. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see he's lined up on the line, out wide in space. He buzzes his feet. He runs the alleyway. He keeps his outside arm free. I mean, it's a really versatile, talented player. And the thing about defense, too, is, I mean, defense is all about packaging. You mentioned a moment ago, 3-down player, 3rd-down specialist, whatever. I mean, especially early on, like if you're a true freshman or whatever, and just to get to the field, like everybody keeps asking about Jordan Ross. And man, Tennessee's excited about him, right? He's a 5-star talent. He's got loads and loads of athletic ability. He wasn't here in spring, so he's behind the 8 ball a little bit. And you look in front of him, and you got like James Pierce and Caleb Herring and Joshua Josephs. So his role is going to be minimal. However, if he were to come in spring or in fall camp and do really, really well as a young freshman, there are packages to get him on the field. And that's what I'm saying about, like, if you're a defensive guy like Christian Gass, young in your career, early in your career, there are packages where you can get on the field and impact Tennessee's defense and then kind of figure out where you're going to be when it's all said and done. Goes back to versatility.
It is versatile, but I think also Tennessee can sell. They've done a good job of playing freshmen, and putting them in different situations, and letting them go. And one of the things kids look at too. I mean, sub packages are great, right? I mean, Nick Saban he changed defensive football for a long time. That's why we were playing 10-9 football games for a long time, because he was sub packaging for everything. He had a 2nd and 8 sub package. He had a 2nd and 4 sub package. He had a 3rd. But with tempo now, you're looking for guys who could stay on the field for more snaps, because
that's a great point.
So being able to play multiple downs and staying on the field against tempo offenses is really important. And I think that's something that Christian Gass is aware of. Look, if you watch the tape on YouTube or you're read anything, I mean, he's a pretty polished player. I mean, that's a good program he plays in. He plays with a lot of good natural fundamentals. He is not just a see ball, hit ball kind of guy as a player. He plays fast. He plays aggressive. But I think those fundamentals, and at that position at linebacker, versatility is more than it's ever been, because you can't, Rob, you can't play the hammer middle linebacker on first down, or run him in there on 3rd and 3, because that guy's got to be able to play in space on 2nd and 7, because you can't sub him in and out like you could years ago in college football.
No, man. Like I said, I think that's a really good point, Hubbard, and it made me think that you're going to see more. I think we're probably seeing them already. I'm sure we are. See more. Is he a safety or outside linebacker? It doesn't matter. I mean, or is he a like gas? Is he a defensive end or an outside linebacker? I mean, there's always going to be a place for the 6'4", 310-pound guy. I mean, I think in the game of football always, but you're right. I think that the dudes that don't have to come off the field on 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 9, man, they're getting more and more valuable.
Well, it's kind of silly too. You look back at the All SEC preseason teams. You've got 2 running backs on each team. Who plays with 2 running backs anymore? You've got 2 receivers on each team. Who plays with just 2 receivers nowadays in this? It's like, come on, like you got to differentiate the edge rushers from the defensive linemen and all that as well. But now I think Tennessee's got a good one here. And I mean, you look ahead, and Brent, I'm not asking you AP style, give me percentages here. I'm not doing that, but I mean, Tennessee's in a good spot here. Okay, you got Christian Gass that just committed. Obviously, you had won a really, really nice pickup last weekend as well. And you look ahead, and you've got some commits coming up, whether it be to Tennessee or Ohio State or whoever, for David Sanders. You've got Shady Hayward coming up here this weekend. You've got Onus coming up. You've got you're still in the conversation for Juan Gass and Josh Petty. Some of these other guys. You've got some flip candidates like Jaden Perlotti, Deshaun Brame. I mean, Tennessee's in a pretty. My light just keeps going off every podcast. I have no clue what's going on. Tennessee's in position here with a lot of really talented players, and you're not going to get them all. But boy, you get a nice little handful of those guys. Your class, which already is pretty decent, man, it's sitting really pretty from a national perspective. It's like, oh man, look at this Tennessee class. Top 10, top 5 in the SEC. They're meaning some business.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. And again, I mean, I think that this time a year ago, Tennessee looked to be in solid shape with some guys, and it just didn't go. They didn't go their way. They finished second. They were the bridesmaids to too many guys a year ago. Right now, Tennessee's finishing the bride. I mean, because listen, when Christian Gass left Knoxville, Tennessee had all the momentum. Were they going to hold it for 4 weeks till he made a decision? The answer is they did. And give Chop and Tennessee and Tim Banks, give William Inge, give everybody credit for what they did to get the momentum and then to hold it to the finish line. And I think right now you feel like, based on what they've done with Travis Smith, based on what they've done now with Christian Gass, and where you think they are with Shady Hayward coming up this Saturday, you feel like Tennessee is in a position to close much better than they did a year ago, when really after July 4th, they got Jordan Ross, and that was kind of the close. That was it. That's not going to be the case this year, and that's why Tennessee's in a position, I think, to be a solid top 10 class, and could be flirting with the outside edge of the top 5 if everything fell their way. So we'll see, kind of what happens. I mean, Austin's been talking about Deshaun Brame. I mean, I think he's going to be here sooner rather than later. There's a lot of Oregon scuttlebutt out there that he's going to flip. Feels like Tennessee, which had the momentum up until Friday night before he committed to Oregon, really has continued to have some momentum with him. So we'll see what happens with that one. That's the only tight end Tennessee would take, but they would certainly take him. And we'll see what that looks like here in the next week or so as he makes his way back to Knoxville. And then we'll see with David Sanders. David Sanders not going to take any more trips. He's not going anywhere this week, and they're moving towards a decision. And I don't know that he's going to move the date up, but I guess anything's possible, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. But I mean, I don't think Tennessee could put their best foot forward any more than they have with David Sanders right now. And I mean, obviously that's the big one on there when you look at the ranking and you look at the need and you look at who this guy is and what he's all about. That's a huge deal. But they are poised to have another nice 3 or 4 weeks here in recruiting, which will change the dynamic of this class even more, which is a good class now. It becomes a pretty elite class potentially for Tennessee.
Before we move on to our closing comments on Todd Helton and his Hall of Fame bid, I do want to ask. Everybody is obsessed, and deservingly so. He's doing a great job, and he's been doing a great job for Tennessee behind the scenes. Nobody just knew who he was until really the last couple of months. Chop, he's a huge part of Josh Heupel's off the field staff. He's doing a great job. How valuable is Chop to Rodney Garner and to Josh Heupel, in his role in the coaching staff?
Well, I think it's valuable to this recruiting class.
Yeah.
When you look at it, it's not just defensive linemen. He's involved in multiple. He's been involved in guys who play various positions that he's been heavily involved in. Charles House, obviously, defensive lineman. Christian Gass, a linebacker. On and on with guys that he's been involved in, and so I think he's extremely valuable, which makes it really fascinating with this new rule change. And what Josh Heupel is going to do. Because I can promise you this, everybody around the country who didn't know who he was, Rob, has figured out who he is. I guarantee you Georgia's got a firm idea who he is after the Christian Gass recruitment when they maybe didn't know a whole lot about him, a year ago. So really valuable, really important, and has done a terrific job as a recruiter and does a good job at helping Rodney as a coach. I think that he's got great relationship with guys on the roster, Rob, helping them with extra film study and stuff behind the scenes with Rodney, working in tow with Rodney. It's not good cop, bad cop. You know what I'm saying? They're not playing it that way. But I think, he's been he's a really nice part of this staff. Okay. He is beyond an analyst. He's beyond he's a huge part of the staff. Big reason for Tennessee and very important for them moving forward.
And then you would talk about if you're a young guy and Chop is clearly taking advantage of it. But if you're a young guy in this business that's willing to put in the work, could you have a better mentor than that? And clearly, Chop is, if you're willing to put in the work, it's, you're going to get out of it once you put into it. And I wouldn't imagine that it's easy. And when you're trying to break in, you guys all know this, guys in that business, the hours are ridiculous. But you're right. Hubbard, his name, it's gotten out there a lot more in this, this spring and all season. But his name is, Eric knows. That name has been percolating over in the complex for a couple of years.
Yeah, Tennessee had a guy back in the early 2000s, back when they were doing a lot of California recruiting, who kind of set assistant coaches up. It was different. Recruiting was different, obviously. You didn't have all the stuff that you have going on now. But Sean Quinn was a guy that was a GA who never could go on the road, never went out on the road, but worked behind the scenes. And this was back in a time where guys didn't come in for 7 unofficial visits type deal, but he worked the phones relentlessly and got Tennessee to the point where they got a visit out of the West Coast kids. He was the one who laid the groundwork and got them to the point of coming in for a visit, and then Tennessee tried to close. So it's happened before. Chop's just a little bit different now because he's so involved, not just with the phone calls, but these kids are making so many unofficial visits to Tennessee. And he's spending so much time with those guys when they're in there on their unofficial visits. He's very valuable. Josh Heupel's gonna have to have a plan for Chop because people are going to come after Chop. There's no doubt about that.
Over the weekend, a VFL, a Knoxville native, Todd Helton, was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, Cooperstown. Of course, we knew for months now that he was going to be part of this class, and it came to fruition over the weekend. He got up there and did his speech, which, Brent, I know you made a post on the board. For anybody that knows Todd Helton, that is not something he was probably excited about doing, get in front of a crowd and on national television and talking about himself. But he did such a great job, and it's really, really kind of cool to see one of the greatest baseball players, certainly of this generation, but now he's a Hall of Famer, and he played high school baseball and football right over here at Knox Central High School. He quarterbacked Tennessee for a little bit, and tons and tons of memories, and we've written about it, we've spoken about it. But Todd Helton, he's now officially a Hall of Famer, and a really, really good weekend for him and for a lot of Tennessee fans who made the trip.
Yeah, nice shout out to Tony Vitello as well. That's always good, right? Tony Vitello continues to stay in the news.
Can do no wrong.
thanks to people right now. But I mean, and again, I'm totally biased here. Okay, I mean, and I get that, but people ask you all the time about your job and what was your favorite this, what was your favorite that. I think back to the start of my career when I started covering football practice on an everyday basis in 1994, and I was heavily involved in baseball at the radio station with Mike Keith. Then my first 2 years in this business, I was daily covering Peyton Manning in the fall, and I was daily covering Todd Helton in the spring. That's a pretty good start to your career. I mean, you talk about falling into it. To be 21 years of age, 20 years of age, whatever. I guess I was 20, just turned 20 in the fall of 94. I mean, to be interviewing those guys as a 20-year-old, trying to figure out what I'm doing, and to see both of them in the Hall of Fame, you talk about a blessing. Like, holy Toledo. Like, I didn't think of it as at that point in time as, yeah, okay, whatever. And then you went on and see what all they did and their accomplishments, and you're like, man, those guys were really good. They knew they were good, and I wasn't very good at the time, but they were very patient with me. Two terrific guys, two totally different personalities, totally different styles, but two of the best competitors to have played at the University of Tennessee in any sport, and well-deserved. I thought Todd's speech was fantastic. I wondered how he would handle it. That's not a comfort level for him in any way, shape, or form. But I thought he was vintage Todd Helton. Rob, I thought if you watched it, I thought you could tell he was uncomfortable, but I thought he paid a nice tribute to all the people that helped him along the way. I thought he was very humbled in everything that he did, but also felt like he was kind of like, how quick can I get off the stage and get back seated somewhere and let somebody else talk, which is kind of vintage Todd Helton.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about how your first impression of him, in 1994. Growing up here, in the area, I remember him more as a football player. I mean, high school for sure. I mean, I can remember, back in the day, like me, being young, I can remember going in like maybe the two biggest football games I ever saw in high school. Like that were excited. Not Central played Marshtown West 2 years in a row in the playoffs. One was at Marshtown, one was at Central. James Stewart was on one side, and Todd was on the other, and it was people were 4 or 5 deep along the fences, and he was I don't know, and Eric, I know I make fun of you sometimes for being so young and not remembering how things were, but Hubbard, back before the internet, man, there was some buzz sometimes around high school sports stuff, but it was all underground, word of mouth, and it wasn't necessarily on the 6 o'clock news. But it had to be a really big deal, and and Todd Helton back then could generate that. Like somebody like me could drive, him and his buddies or their dads would drive an hour, to go watch him play a high school playoff game. And I don't think there's a lot of that going on, because you could stream it,
right?
Probably on something on Diamond Clear.
Yeah.
Right.
You can watch us on Playoff Friday.
Yeah.
Well,
it was a big deal. I mean, back then, when he was 17 years old, I mean, he was a big enough deal to generate, buzz in Newport or Greenback, from Central. And it was, I'm growing up at that age. That's the only way to say he was a very big deal as a 17-year-old dude with it before I even knew he played baseball.
Yeah. I mean, I think from a football standpoint, they played Oak Ridge in what I guess was a region game. I don't even know what it was back then, but Oak Ridge had Sean Summers and Big Richard Howard and Jerry Colquitt at quarterback. All three of those guys ended up at Tennessee. And of course, Todd Helton was playing quarterback for Central. I mean, that was a standing room only, like Blankenship Field. I mean, you couldn't get around it. Like, they're turning people away, to go watch that game, because that was the marquee game, because it was the best of the best playing. I remember when Todd was drafted, he was drafted by the Padres, and there was a lot of people who thought he might take pro money and go as opposed to go to college. I think his mom had a great deal in his decision to go to college, which he has since said was the absolute best decision for him, because mentally he wasn't ready to get on a bus in single A and rookie ball as a 17, 18-year-old and ride around and figure it out. But it was a little bit of a surprise that he ended up coming to college, and then he's playing baseball. And he made the joke in his speech about having a half-eaten sandwich and a bag of M&Ms in his helmet at UCLA in '94. He would come to practice for football practice, and he would go out and he would never strap in his rib. Back then they wore the rib light pads that went around and his back flap was always loose and his rib light. Like, he would go out there and he was just there. Like, he wasn't going to play. He knew he was. I mean, he was on a football scholarship. He was the backup guy, and he was going to be the backup to the backup, and he was never really going to play football. And then obviously in '94 he got thrusted into it. Tweaks his knee in Starkville, Mississippi, and everybody was like, "All right, dude, you're done. Like, you're done. Like, you're done with football." And he spent about a month rehabbing. And what you would hear at practice back when practice was open is you would just hear a ping, because his rehab was he was at Lindsey Nelson Stadium taking BP. That was his knee rehab. And everybody kind of figured out what he was doing. And I think Coach Dickey just went to him and said, "Listen, man, you're on football scholarship. At least come stand at practice until the season is over." And so he did. He came back out in late October and all of November, and he stands there and watches practice. And at Vanderbilt in '94, he got to Phillip and he got to Cutcliffe, and he said, "If y'all gonna make me stand out here for all these practices, I'm gonna get at least one snap in my final game in college football." And Tennessee's winning 65-0, and he goes in and takes a snap and trots back off, and that was it. And then it was off to baseball for him. But just a fun guy who was quiet, reserved, could have a temper. Had bad days, didn't want to talk to you, was very clear he didn't want to deal with you at that point.
Tell the story that you put on the board about him saying, "If you ask me about my injury, I'm going to."
We were at Kentucky. And this would have been '95, I guess, was Kentucky, '95, and his hip was bothering him. And I was doing the pregame interview for the radio, because I was up there with John Wilkerson. Mike Keith was off that weekend. And I was up there, and so I went down to grab the player for a pregame interview, and I'm grabbing Todd because I knew him the best, and he was the best player or whatever, and he reluctantly did it. He didn't want to do it, and he had ice, and he was limping around, and we got ready to get started, and he was like, "Look, I'll do whatever you want me to do for 90 seconds or 2 minutes, but if you ask me anything about how I feel, that microphone's going to go a place where you don't want it to go, so don't ask me how I feel. Just ask what you need to ask and get out of here. But I'm fine. It's baseball. We need to go play." They weren't playing great at that point, so there was a little frustration on that team at that point in time. And he did not want to do the interview, and he certainly did not want to talk about himself or how he felt or what was going on. And he just wanted to go out and hit the baseball. Tennessee ended up sweeping Kentucky that weekend, and really kind of got them jump-started back in the right direction, and got them into regional play where they went on and advanced to the College World Series.
What year was it? Was it 06, 07, whenever the Rockies were in the World Series, lost to the Red Sox? Anyway, Boston made a run at him the offseason before, tried to get him to go and be their first baseman, and he ended up staying at Colorado. And then I think he said it over the weekend. He was like, and I've said this before, but it means more to me to play for a World Series with Colorado than to win it with somebody else. I thought that was
right.
Cool.
I mean, Todd's a loyal dude, man. I mean, if you're in Todd's circle, you're in. Now, I mean, the circle's not real big, but if you're in his circle, I mean, you're in. And the Rockies organization was terrific to him. And he acknowledged that. He acknowledged that in his speech. I mean, he's friends with the owners, and he had a great relationship. He was such a part of that, the fabric of that organization in the face. And that's Todd. I mean, once he says, "Hey, I'm here. I'm not interested in chasing to be on a quote great team, to chase a ring or whatever. I'm comfortable with this is my team. These are my teammates. Let's go be the best version that we can be." And man, they had a heck of a run, and it came up short, obviously. But I mean, what a September and October that team had, and Todd had, to carry them into the World Series and a chance to win it all. I mean, I can't imagine that he had many better professional baseball memories than that run right there. Because, I mean, he was flirting with 400 at one point, and, man, he had clutch hit after clutch hit. They found ways to win and all kinds of different styles, and fun to watch. It was a lot of fun. If you're a Tennessee fan, you got caught up in some Rocky mania at that point in time.
07 was the year. It was 07. Colorado falling to Boston in the World Series. That'll do it here for this edition of the Volquest podcast. Big thanks, as always, to you guys for tuning in, making us a part of your morning routine. Big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions for being the presenting sponsor of this show. Again, if you have a need, if you want an upgrade, if you need repairs done, whatever the case is, pick up the phone, dial 865-524-5888, or visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. We're just a week away from having football content every single day. Start a Tennessee football fall camp. About 5 weeks away from the season opener. All that and more, plus recruiting coverage, plus basketball coverage, plus, literally everything else. It's over at Volquest.com. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, there is a promo code on the screen where you can type in that promo code, pay $1, you get 2 months access to the Volquest.com and the Journal's Quarters. So go ahead and put in that promo code. For $1, you get 2 months for free. For Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in and catching us here on the Volquest podcast.